I hear a baby.
Wow, the microphone's quite nice.
Yeah.
It picks up everything.
And Ildikó,
Hi.
who the hell are you?
Hi, Matthew. I think you know me better than I know myself. I don't know. You might have said
All right,
something else,
I do.
but
All right, I'll take this, Ildikó. So Ildikó, no, I'll let you do it. Sorry.
so I am a person on this earth and just a person. One out of I feel like I can't say an exact number because there's people being born every second. So yes, many, many people. And I am kind of a interesting, I guess to say like my background for work, I can just explain that. So I moved to Oregon. I live in Oregon, and I moved to Oregon in 2011. Before that, this is like a whole nother chapter, so I'm not even going to get there. But I moved here,
All right,
and
hold on. Let me
I
get my
started.
pipe.
Okay,
Go on. Yes, I'm listening.
we can go back. You could do like a Hobbit, where you start Lord of the Rings 1, and then we can do like the prequel afterwards. But anyhow,
Cast your mind back. The year was 1917.
I'm not going to say any dates just to not date myself,
right.
Although I'm sure it'll come out later, so it's fine. But yeah, I moved to Oregon in 2011, kind of on a like, fine, I'll try it out. I used to live here in middle school, so it was pretty fun. So I had kind of a not high expectations, but I'm still here, let's say over a decade later. So I guess it must have it must have been a good choice. I do like it here. But I moved here for a job, so I got hired by Intel as an engineer, and I have a background in mathematics, so I guess that makes sense. But I also studied graphic design and IT, so lots of things. I just couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And at Intel, I really started to discover myself, and I realized that I'm not really an engineer fully. Like I could do it, but I just didn't find as much enjoyment in it as I do in now. I'm a product designer, so in product design. But my journey there was definitely not short, and it took years and self-discovery to get there. But in my first job, I really just noticed that I don't enjoy the engineering process itself, like the coding and the debugging and testing. It was okay, but I really enjoyed like the before parts, which was talking to people that were actually going to use my code and what their issues were. And so, that really starts to sound like UX research, right? So I really enjoyed that and started looking up like, okay, what kind of job does this? Like more is more like customer focused and like thinking about the human, not just like the code itself. So I moved towards product management, business analysis with my data background, and then after that, took a leap of faith, left Intel, went back to school, and I took like a little career break, but really it was just a career transition into product design. And, many names, UX design, UI design. I'm sure you could find many diagrams about how things overlap and whatnot, but made it over there to that side. And that was 7 years ago. 6-7 years ago. So I've been doing it ever since, and I love the process. I love the work, and so I think I found my place, at least for now. AI might change everything though, so I can't quite predict
hoping.
The future.
Right, it's just going to change everything, and everything's going to be great. And
there's definitely conflicting views on this.
Oh, are there? Okay, well, I mean, we can discuss that at some point and figure it all out, I'm sure. So
sorry, that was a long story, but
that was a long story, and thank you for sharing it. There's no length requirements on the show, so it's not like you've got to stick to a script. That said, I'll start holding up cue cards.
Yeah.
Do you think
that's the wrong one?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Animal husbandry. What? Okay, I can go with it. The switch from engineering to product design, was there like a moment or some experience that said, "Oh, I want to go do that"?
Um, I feel like it built up over time. The place I was working, it was a group where we were really focused on like speed and just getting things done as fast as possible. So it was a really like one person just took like an area of interest or not area of like specialty
Mm-hmm.
and did all the tasks. So I was, you could say I was like full stack designer developer, like everything. And we didn't have a UI, so in that sense, it wasn't really like creating a UI. It was creating behavior of like basically it was like air traffic control and deciding which products it was in a factory, right? So factory setting, like which
Mm-hmm.
product would get preference and like it was just like this, you know, kind of intelligent thing that had to organize so many different like products. Like I'm just we have there's so I'm like thinking back, there's so many like jargon words and I'm trying not to throw them at you. But in that sense, like I got to do everything. And after a while, I just took a step back and I was like, okay, I've been here, 3 years or 4 years, and like, what am I really enjoying out of this job? Like, what's my future look like? As you come in as like your first job, you're just like, yeah, I have a job, and you start working it, and you're trying to figure out like, how to do your job. And at some point, you're like, okay, I think I got this, but like, is this really what I want to do for a long time? Is there were people on my team who had been doing this for like decades, and I'm like, do I want to do this forever? And the answer was no. And so then I was thinking, okay, well, what's next? What do I really like about this job? And kind of thinking through that probably is what sparked that interest of like, okay, what's next? What do I need to do to move on to something I enjoy more than what I do
Mm-hmm.
now? Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it wasn't maybe a specific moment, but it was a series of conversations over a very short period of time because I started off as a tech writer. And then so I was writing like online help and manuals for the software that was being designed. And I kept having to explain how things worked. And I was like, well, if this was just designed better, we wouldn't have to explain it so much. And someone said, oh, there's a team at the company that does that. And I said, there's a team at the company that makes this crappy software. Let me at them. Not in the let me at them, but like, please, may I join?
Yeah.
Is it a pay rise? I'll take it. Yeah, and that's how I jumped over because it just
So
was.
different
Yeah,
journey
because I was
wise.
like, if we could just fix the screen, we wouldn't have to write the help, or at least write as much. And they were like, well, if you're so bent out of shape about this, why don't you go join this team? And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And now I'm
That's
the
great
one
that they
making the
let you.
crappy software. So, yeah.
Yeah, let's not go
Yeah,
down that
it was
rabbit
good.
hole.
Yeah, no. Yeah, let's be real. Even after so long, we are still not making the best products we could be making. There's too many
Absolutely.
variables to keep track of, and
It's more and more complex as we get more and more technologically advanced. There's more complexity in like personalization and different types of customers. I mean, I forgot to mention currently I'm working as a contractor at Audible, and being in the Amazon ecosystem is just eye-opening. Like how wildly customized they are. And working at smaller companies, they're just trying to do their best, and they're like, well, is there something we could like, is there a solution we can use so that it covers everybody, all the use cases, all the type of
mm-hmm.
people that might be using this software? And Amazon, it's like, no, we want to personalize for all these different cases. And so before working here, at first I was like, man, I wish we had more of that, and now I'm like, oh, we need less of it because it just
Hmm.
really complicates like a simple problem. You might be like changing two buttons and you're like, well, for this user, it should say this, and for this user, it should be this color versus that color versus, like it just, but you're really just solving one tiny little, like seemingly simple problem. So that there's I don't know if it's a saying or just sort of like common, like maybe known fact that the more complexity you take on as a developer designer, like basically internalize the complexity, the more simple it is for the customer. But if you don't, if you say, well, whatever, the customer has to deal with it, we'll just make it simple on our end, they're going to have a harder time.
Hmm.
So there's a trade-off, and you have to kind of find that middle ground where you're not like spending 2 years to put something out there, but you're also not causing problems out there for your customers to deal with.
Right.
So,
or the best of both worlds, where it takes you 8 years to launch and you're also producing terrible stuff that pisses off your customers. So,
if you're there,
what?
then
No
I'm
personal
sorry.
experience with that. Okay. That's, to your point about, needing it to be one way for some people and another way for others, like that really is an environment that allows decision fatigue and as a phrase I'm trying to think of, I can't think of it, but basically
For the customer, for the engineer,
for the people making the stuff, people just get tired of making the decisions over and over and over again, especially when you've made the decision already and you have to make it again because someone got back from vacation and now we have to reopen the issue again because they have an opinion. And it's so tiresome that people stop. Over time, they stop fighting. Sure. Fighting altogether. Standing up for what's right, standing up for better ways of doing it. And the focus then becomes, how can we just make progress? But I don't know the extent to which that it's, how can we make progress toward a shared goal? That's the part that I think a lot of teams have a lot of trouble with. It's that shared goal aspect of things, especially, or even just across a company. Like, what is this company trying to do? And maybe that's not your experience, but, and I do know it's your experience in some things, but maybe not right now where everything's all buttoned up. No, I'm kidding. Like, is any place really all buttoned up?
No, never. I mean, I've never worked at some place where you come in and everything's just working great and there's no issues. I mean, that's why you have a job. Right?
But AI can fix that, so it's fine.
I mean, or cause more problems. We have a book club at Audible. The first book,
really,
it just started up. Yeah, and it was Morality
audiobooks?
AI. It was audiobooks, of course.
Hey.
Yeah, and this is a book that I'll have to look up the author. I don't remember, but it has if you have Audible, it's red colored. I don't know the so you could look up Morality AI.
You're so terrible. It's like the booksellers, like even like in physical spaces, the bookseller's worst nightmare. So I was in 2 weeks ago and there was a red book on this table. Can you tell me the title?
Hey, I'll look it up. Morality AI. That didn't spell morality right.
AI will fix it.
Yeah, I can't. It's not even coming up. So, and of course, I have a million test accounts. Anywho.
Book club, reading the book.
Yeah, it brings up so many good examples of how AI has really helped and also how AI has really not helped. And it's so overwhelming. Like, I think before I listened to this book, I was like, okay, yes, AI has its practical purposes, and then sometimes it doesn't help because maybe it's just not advanced enough or whatever. But I didn't think too far past it because, like, you live your life and you never think about scenarios like that you're not really involved in. But it gives you like literally hundreds of different examples of how certain AIs have like helped, solve or save someone's life. But at the same time, in other cases, it actually killed somebody or, has caused a big detriment. And you're just, as a designer, you're like, holy crap, how do I get in front of this? I can't. It's coming way too fast. It has a mind of its own. A lot of times, like we're talking about generative AI or like even, talking about like cars. I mean, there's many examples out there, but where there's sort of a black box, you just throw information in and then something comes out, and that something that comes out can be very good or very bad. And sometimes you don't have the time to assess that, and you just have to make a decision. And that can be dangerous. But yet at the same time, I mean, I made this actually really good analogy that, I personally like, maybe I'm biased, but I rock climb. So there's this concept of, or these things called carabiners, and everyone probably knows what they are. And some of them are non-locking, so you can just open them. Those are probably the ones you get from like REI for free or whatever. But then there's ones that are like, you have to lock them, and there's an actual action. There's like you screw it or whatever. You have to actually do something to lock it. But then there's also ones that auto lock. So it's basically you just do a slightly different motion, and you can open it, and then when you let it go, it just automatically locks. So in my metaphor, that's like AI, where it kind of just helps you. And in most cases, it's great because you don't have to perform an extra action to keep yourself safe. But in some other cases where maybe someone hands you a different carabiner that doesn't do the auto locking, you forget that it doesn't. And then you don't do the extra thing that you need to do to actually keep yourself safe, and therefore cause someone's death or your injury or whatever. So it gives you that help. But then if you have to resort back to a less advanced technology, then you could very easily make mistakes. So what's better? Like, we're going forward, it's better to have that help, but at some point, like, how much help is too much? And, in some cases, the repercussions, maybe the questions we need to be asking is, what is the worst case scenario here? If it's harm to someone's life, or like, at that level of like, this is a problem and can be harmful, then we need to take a closer look. But if it's not, then maybe we just let it cook, as the new generations, Gen Z tends to say, just let it do its thing. But no, if it's dangerous, then it definitely needs more scrutiny. And yes, it will take longer to launch something, but we need to be doing that. Otherwise, yes, all those like sci-fi movies will come to fruition where like, people are dying left and right because of technology. Anyway, other questions?
I guess the question. No, what I thought of while you were explaining that is, thinking about the worst case scenario. I've had, I don't know, maybe because of my mentality, just who I am, it's one of the things that I tend to look into is, what's the risk with this? What is the worst case scenario? How could this be used to hurt somebody? Every single place I've ever worked, the business, trademark symbol, is not interested in that for the most part. If they're regulated to some extent, then they are a little bit more interested in that. But they really don't want to talk about how their product could be used for ill, or how it could get somebody in trouble, or how it could hurt somebody. And I'm wondering,
why not?
Well, because they have to ship. I saw somebody had screenshotted a message, I think from Twitter, but some startup person saying, we're we're too busy shipping things to worry about ethics right now. Like, our priority is shipping. Our priority is getting our product in our customers' hands. Our priority is, and the background there is, our priority is to stop hemorrhaging money, to start making money wherever that line is with whatever the company is. But, for the most part, I think the people who are in charge of whatever's being built, and I'm not going to put this on product management or engineering or whatever, it's a group effort. They're really focused on that. Let's just get it out there and see what people do with it. We're testing, we're learning. And there's just no appetite for, hey, let's slow down for a moment and say, all right, what if we give someone the wrong answer and then they use that information, and I'm going to pick on it, and they put glue on their pizza so that things stick better, as Google's AI search stuff has told people to do. And I always find it curious, like, have you found any way of, like, getting the attention of somebody to think about the consequences of their actions?
In terms of a company, like, actually paying attention to that question is how we can hurt somebody. I mean, so I hadn't really thought about this as a designer as closely as I really should have, I think. But I am definitely, like, I've watched The Social Network. Like, there's been lots of precedents of, like, technologies being out there and causing a pretty horrible issue. And, you could be that, like, person who's like, I'm going to try to, like, avoid that before it happens. But really, you can't prevent everything. But is it going to slow you down that bad to just ask the question and at least make note of it? Even if you do ship your product without actually, like, designing for all these scenarios, it's really good to at least document and maybe attack each of those possibilities, one every quarter or something, where you're actually chipping away at it while you're not blocking it. At least that's kind of how I would approach it, is where you have that pressure behind you. Sure, we're all in capitalism. We need to deliver and they need to make money. But at the same time, do we have to say no to, like, absolutely not even looking at that question at all, period? Like, I don't think that's, like, the right answer. And I guess I'll bring up, there's a book I read by Eva Penzey-Moog. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but Design for Safety. And after I read this book, it's not that long, actually. I have it with me. It's not that long, but it has an outlined process of, like, what you can do to at least do something about it. Like, there's obviously, she details the whole process that she recommends, but I'm trying to find the page where it says this. But you could do the first 2 steps and then stop there. So it says the total time of all of this, research, creating archetypes, brainstorming possible problems and solutions and testing it would take 3 to 4 days. So is that worth it? I think yes. I'm not a CEO. I don't think I would ever survive being one, because I just don't think that way. I'm much more cautious. I like to sort of see the whole landscape and make decisions based on the whole picture. And if this is part of the picture, then I want to know about it at least and do something about it if I can.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, this book is great. I would definitely read it if you're a designer, even if you aren't able to implement any of it. Just spread the knowledge, and I think it's important. It's just good to think about before you launch something. Spend a day or 2 on it. Like, is that so much to ask? I know. I haven't had personal experience, though, like, actually getting this through to a small company. In a larger company, I think it's a little bit more easy to get this kind of thing, like, through, because they already have a lot of loopholes they have to jump through. So, and this isn't really a legal loophole. Like, we have tons of legal advisors that it is part of our design process when we have any change that's especially like, I think pretty much almost every project I worked on, we had to have a meeting with legal and show them like the new designs and the new copy and whatever, and just make sure there's nothing sketchy about it unless it's been previously approved. And of course there's new legal like legislation coming into effect all the time, and that also needs to be considered. So I mean, maybe the answer is legislation, like you have to put this in your process. I don't know how you would do it, but like to make it streamlined across all companies. But they've already have this like culture of like, we need to make sure we're not causing like a lawsuit to occur,
right?
As much as possible. It still happens, but
yeah. So I wonder, I was thinking about while you were explaining that one of the, I don't want to say this, one of the things about, we'll just say broadly, being a designer, that I think is, I'm going to start this sentence over because that was terrible. One of the things about being a designer is you've got your job description that helps guide what you're supposed to do. And around that is the culture, processes, things like that in the company that also guide what you're supposed to be doing, what your expectations are. And I'm wondering if there is maybe the answer is legislation, maybe the answer is legal, but I'm wondering if there's a way to, and I don't know, this isn't the best way to put it, but a way to have a career description or a profession description that includes part of your job as a designer is to reduce harm. Or I'm sure there's a positive way to say that. Who knows what that is? That's not my area of expertise. Because one of the, you just said, not sure how to make that happen across an industry or across a bunch of companies, but like the common denominator of sorts is that there's a bunch of designers that work at these companies. And if, I'm not saying union, not saying union, but, if we could have a way of expressing the importance of this, that is something that everybody's doing. And I know that not everybody's going to have the same level of success with it, depending on if it's your first job, size of the company. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But if we're just continuously expressing these ideals and have that show up in our work, have that show up in our conversations, that we could start edging people toward setting aside a few days to investigate. Even if we find something, we assess the potential risk for it. If it's, medium, whatever that ends up meaning, maybe it is something that gets launched, but you immediately start working on amendments to it to make it better. Because I understand too, the need to keep moving with these things. Although I do think there is a large aspect of this whole, we need you working with a sense of urgency. We need you working really quick. You've got to ship. That it's a bunch of people saying that. And so it becomes true, but the motivation for it, the real reason for it isn't really there. Like, we don't actually have to go so fast to still ship something. That's not every company, but I think it's more companies than.
Yeah, and just being smart about what you're shipping, because sometimes, sometimes a question like, why is this particular feature that important? And there's not really anything to back it up. It's just like maybe the people running the company think they're important. I mean, in some cases, like you have really smart, really like kind of people that are leaders that are really good at intuiting like what customers need, but that's rare. I find that someone knows that. So sometimes like the feature is just like, well, just in case, or like, oh, that's, and so you could really trim down what you're shipping and just make sure that it's the bare minimum of actually like the full slice. Like obviously you want it to be reliable and work well and give it a little bit of delight, that not just like make it boring and functional, but put that in there. And as you were talking, yeah, I was thinking over my career, like at first, like, when I studied UX first, like back, I mentioned I went back to school and there was not really too much focus on, like, for example, all the different aspects of accessibility or, there's not like a huge focus on copywriting, like UX writing. And these are all
Mm-hmm.
sort of specialties. So like at bigger companies, like at Audible, we have copywriter. There's more than one now, but there used to be only one. Should be a lot more of them. There's people that tailor their their whole job is to make copy better. And same with accessibility. There's somebody who's like an expert who can just look at a design and be like, boom, boom, boom. These are the things that need to be improved or like annotated or whatever. And I'm not saying like there should be this person that does the job for everybody and like, the rest of us can just kind of sit back and let them do their job. In fact, we need to be involved and learn from those people. And that's what the accessibility expert at our team just did recently is say, okay, there's this process, and I think it's an Amazon process. So she just brought it into our team and said, like, this is the process. These are the annotations. These are the things you need to look at. So things like what heading, what the button actual screen reader might read out, somebody who can't see but is using a screen reader. And it's really complex. So it's like really intimidating. And I felt personally intimidated by like accessibility, like specking accessibility. You're like, what does that even mean? This is crazy. Like there's different disabilities of all kinds. And how do I make sure that I'm checking all the boxes? And there's tools out there. So you can do that. You just have to do it a few times and get more comfortable with it. And then as time goes on, you get better and better and better. And I feel like this thinking of like morality and ethical design and making sure we're not causing harm unintentionally is just another slice. So like it's kind of like, is this design accessible? There's percentages. Is it 85%, 95%? Is there a way to like market like, yes, it is. And then is this then through the ethical like steps? And if it hasn't, then it's not. Probably maybe it has some loopholes, or maybe, there's in the book they describe like specific features that are like at risk for these issues. I think one of them is like authentication. So, if you give access to your account to somebody else, or, there's like a share function that's not necessarily constant over time. You might give access, but like a year later, you broke up with the person. Maybe the relationship is soured, and therefore you want to remove that. And is there a way to do that? And is there a way to make sure that that person is logged out from all of the devices that, like, is that a step that is part of the software? Another thing is cameras and connection to CarPlay. I mean, there's these like tenants. Like if your product doesn't really have that, then you at least can check and say, nope, we don't have that, so that's not an issue. And so so it's not like you need to, you might get a list of like 20 things you need to check, and like half of them don't apply. So maybe it's not that complicated, but it can be very overwhelming at first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking, you were saying that, I was thinking about how like long ago it was, oh, this person deauthorized me from iTunes. Or, now it's changed their password on Netflix or whatever. And I think that's one of the things I think a lot of companies, regardless of their size, level of maturity, when they launch a new product, they really aren't interested in the story of how does this person leave us, because there's some aspect of the thinking, why would anyone ever leave? This thing we made is great. And also, if they leave, then when we report our numbers of how many accounts we have, like, well, that doesn't serve us very well for shareholders or for private equity or whatever. But it tends to just come later, if it comes at all sometimes. Like Facebook is a good example of this. Deleting your account on that is very, very difficult. Deactivating it is easier. I remember deleting my account and how hard it was. And when for some event that I wanted to go to, they were doing it all via Facebook Messenger or whatever it was. You need a Facebook account. So I logged back in. They still had some of my information that they pre-populated. So it didn't delete. Because, why would we give up that data? And it's just, again, it goes back to this whole, how can we help the companies also have the motivation to support their customers, not just engineer an environment where it's easy to extract money from them. Go.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately,
solve it, Ildikó.
No, it's not a solve, but ultimately, like, I think it's not just on designers to like push these forward, but there's got to be legislation for some issues. Like, there is a new legislation, I think, related to like basically FTC. Like, you need to make it possible for someone to cancel their membership to whatever subscription, and there's millions of subscriptions out there. But there's like rules coming into effect about, and I think Europe kind of led the way on this. I think there's also a new rule around like, telling somebody that there's cookies being saved. So
right.
Like, accept the cookies. And, at this point it's like annoying where a lot of times I'll say sure, but sometimes I'll say no. And sometimes the buttons are like, they say, okay, continue. And then the no option is like super tiny and you can't even see it. Or some cases it's like when you go to the customize your settings, it's like very not friendly. So the fact that it's there was probably legislation, but the way it's executed is not necessarily defined. And I think legislation, they try to make it such that it's like not super, super rigid so that you can tailor it to your situation. Like they don't want to like lock it down to one person type. And I mean, I don't even know how they do this. This is like beyond me. But that's where like some legislation, if there's nothing, that could be a lot worse. But if there's at least something that says like you need to make it possible for a customer to completely delete all their data off your platform, however you do that, it still should be possible, then that's a rule that needs to be followed. I don't know. And then, if everybody has to do it, then it sort of levels the playing field. So, that like shareholder concern you mentioned, like people leaving, well, if you have to make it possible, you have to make it possible. And maybe part of the ruling is also like, you have to make it a two-step process or easy, or like just as easy as the sign up or the creating an account is. So there is legislation that can be made. It's just, that's a different career that I'm probably not going to switch to.
No, not time for a career switch. Okay.
I mean, I don't know. If I get frustrated enough, who knows what'll happen.
There you go.
When AI takes my job.
There you go. I mean, ideally you do it before AI takes your job, just saying. But yeah. All right. So now it's time for 7 plus or minus 2 questions. Are you ready?
Oh, wow. Already?
These are hard-hitting gotcha questions. Every single one of them. Especially the fourth one.
Over here.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be anything we've talked about so far. Question number 1. What's one thing you would change about your profession?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Let's see if there's legislation in place. Yes, you can ask a follow-up question.
So my profession as in I'm in a job and I'm doing the job, or is it also around, or can it be also around like looking for jobs that are around or what I need or what in my industry basically?
Yeah, I didn't follow that. I'll say it can be whatever you want. It's when I originally wrote these, I intended it to be about like what you're doing now,
Okay, got it.
but it doesn't have to be limited to that. I'm all about options here for you. Okay.
Okay.
Just for you, not for any of the other people I had conversations with so far. They're suckers. You're great.
You're gonna edit that out, right?
Yeah.
What would I change about my profession? I feel like it depends on the job. Like if you're talking about the current job I have, I'm trying to think like, is there something across all jobs that I've had where there's one thing that I would change? And that's really hard because every job has been so different. But I feel like this is very specific to designers, and it's like the job interview process. So I guess it is specific to us. Is so, I feel like, I mean, maybe it's accurate for other industries, but it's kind of crazy because there's some jobs I got this job in 30 minutes. I had one 30-minute interview. Granted, it was through a recruiter. But after 30 minutes of just chatting, showing a little bit of my work, like 2 days later, it was like, okay, we want to hire this person. Literally the easiest job interview I've ever had, like hands down. And I was like thrilled. I was like, sweet, that's really all it should take. But in some cases, that's not what a process looks like. So we have whiteboard challenges, take-home assignments, all sorts of things. And I totally get the purpose. Like, is this person like have what they say they do? Like, sure. But at some point, especially when you've got like a decade of experience or something, I mean, you probably have more than that even. It's like, why would you need to prove yourself in terms of like your work quality? Like I feel like it comes down more to like how you work with the team. What is your conflict resolution style? Are you able to switch how you communicate with people because everyone's different? It's those soft skills that really matter in the end. Because if you have a decade of experience, like you've gone through all those motions. I don't know. It's like I really don't know what the solution is, but sort of the problem comes down to like, why is it so hard to get through a process and land a job? And like, I don't know. It's kind of like dating. So I really don't know how to solve that problem.
Okay. All right. Kind of like dating.
But that's one thing.
When was the last time you dated? Come on.
It's been a while, but still, yeah. It's just stressful, and you're worried that you didn't have the right makeup on, or whatever. And it's like
I worry about that all the time. I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I had a conversation
like,
yesterday. I had a conversation yesterday with a hiring manager for a position, and I think it went well, and that's why I think I'm not going to get it. Just because it went too well. You're right. It is a dance that most of the moves don't have to be there. I wrote something like 12 years ago at the company I worked at the time, How We Hire. And it's basically, I said, I know if you can do the job from your resume and talking with you for 5 minutes, the other 55 minutes of our conversation or the hour or whatever is really trying to figure out, do I want to work with this person for the next 3 to 5 years or not? And that's really all I want to know. And I would say, as the hiring manager, you're hired. I don't need to put you in front of the team and see what they think, because, sorry, team, suck it up. You've got a new team member, learn how to work with them. Like, I hired them because I feel like they fit in with what we're trying to do. Work together. Like, I don't need their input. And if I do need their input because I'm down to 2 people or something, then I'll say, hey, could you come talk to this person? But you've got to talk with 17 people over the course of 6 weeks because we're urgently hiring, is ridiculous. So please change that. Okay.
Yeah. And just like a 30-minute example of a different, like my husband's he does physical labor, for the lack of a better word. He's basically works in a van building shop right now. But his interview was literally like, he just went in there and it's like, hey, I built this van. I'm thinking of making some changes to it. Here are the things I'm thinking. So the owner of the company came and checked out the van, which is basically the portfolio, and was like, okay, cool. Yeah. And here's what I would change, whatever. And this is for real. Like, he actually wants to make changes. And then he went home, and then it was kind of like a networking interview thing. And then later on, he just said, hey, I'm actually also looking for a job. Like, do you guys have any openings? And he's like, yeah, call me in, 2 weeks. And so he did. And then he went and basically just started working. And they basically, the first week was essentially like a trial week where they made sure that he didn't like tell them that someone else made the van, like that he made the van, but someone else did. And he's like
standing there with a bottle of whiskey. Does anyone else? While we work around power tools.
So it's so different. And, I'm always worried. I'm like, who is he going to find a job? Like, for me, it's like, you have to send out so many resumes. And he literally just walks into shops and is like, hey, can I work here? And they're like, sure, try, like, come in tomorrow and you can do some stuff. And they kind of just figure it out as you go. And of course, he gets paid for that day. But it's, if someone's trying to fake their way and they can't.
Yeah, right.
So,
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think people who are in knowledge work versus physical work, I think will rationalize that it's different somehow. And that you need to be more thoughtful and that you have to take more time with somebody. But you still sign an employment contract that says you work at will and we can fire you for any reason, anytime. Like, if it doesn't work out, you got 1,000 applications. You can go look through that and hire the next person if it really isn't working out. Yeah. Anyway. All right. So well done, both of us. We solved that. Make it faster is what we're saying. The end. Right? Sure. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Make it less painful for everybody.
Less painful. All right. So next question. And there's no constraints around this at all. I'm sorry to do that to you. What's one thing you wish people cared more about?
I guess improving themselves. People cared more about their effect on others in this world. So equally vague response.
I don't know. That sounds pretty specific to me.
I mean, you could apply it in any context, whether it's a relationship or friendship or boss and subordinate, the right terminology, manager, subordinate, whoever reports to you. Yeah, like that relationship. No one's perfect, and I feel like whenever I get feedback on improving one thing or another, I'm like, yes, finally someone's telling me how to get better, because I want to get
Mm-hmm.
better over this course of my life. I don't want to just get set in my ways and just like do things the way they are. And sometimes that feedback can be very like hard to take, because you're like, I've been doing this forever. Why didn't anyone tell me this? Like, there's been this parsley stuck in my teeth for 10 years. Like, no one told me. Like, what the heck?
Right.
And it's like you're embarrassed or whatever, how you feel. Like, there's these feelings that come through. But ultimately, once you get past those feelings, it's like great that someone's told you that this is how they feel. And it might be subjective. Like, maybe that person's more sensitive to something, like
Mm-hmm.
some way that you are or something. And that's a moment you can take where you're like, okay, it depends, but still getting that feedback is important. And then sometimes I've given feedback and I've seen like zero change in people's, but other times it's the opposite, where someone's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, and then they literally change their behavior overnight. um, and yeah, I think that let's all be like nice to each other and kind to each other, and I think it'll be a better world.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think there's a difference between being nice and being kind. And often nice is a way to avoid being kind, because a kindness is to tell someone they have parsley in their teeth, because that person is like, well, I'm a parsley connoisseur and I like to keep it there. Like, okay, conversation over. There could be a reason for why they do what they do. But, the idea that people don't say anything because they want to be nice, like, I feel like that inhibits positive change over time. And the
It's a
better
great
thing is
distinction between the two.
to be kind. Because being kind can be potentially hurtful sometimes. Hopefully temporarily, but so. All right.
I love that.
Next question. You're going to hate this one even more. What
Suspense is killing
accomplishment?
me.
Yeah. What accomplishment are you most proud of that you weren't paid to do?
Yeah, I became a mentor recently, more officially on ADP list, and I'm not being paid to do that. So, and I'm proud of it because I was really holding back for probably a little while, because I was worried that it would take a lot of my time. And, you know, I tend to really get into helping somebody out, and the boundaries there can be hard to really set. But I guess it helps that this platform is really it's good at like telling you how to take care of yourself as a mentor, and like
Mm-hmm.
not overdo it, not take on too many people. And I sat down and really thought about it before going out and signing up for it, because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to get burnt out and I wasn't going to be overwhelmed. And so far, it's been working great, and I've mentored like over 500 minutes or whatever, probably around 8 different people. And I actually set up this series. So when people book with me, they get three 30-minute sessions, and they're spaced out every 2 weeks. So um, it gives me more time to breathe in between them, and
Mm-hmm.
um, also gives me time to like review any like resume or portfolio they have that they might want me to look at, or whatever else that it is. And I write down notes so I know what we talked about, and then continue on the next one. So I've not been burned out by it, and I've definitely been able to keep it to like one a week type of thing. So it's
Mm-hmm.
30 minutes. Usually we go over by 15. Sometimes like we take a whole hour, but it's very limited in time, so I don't have to like do too much prep work for it. And then in between, it's limited. I don't sign up for too much. But I'm proud of myself for two reasons. One, because I actually signed up to do it. Like I was like, okay, I'm going to dive in and do it. And then the other thing is I'm proud of myself for putting those boundaries in place. so that I don't get overloaded and overwhelmed, which has been pretty hard as a person who doesn't like to think of themselves first often. And I have to do that more now. I'm also a new mom of a 1-year-old now. So, knowing what my boundaries are is really important so that I can be a better person, better parent, better partner. So that's definitely been something I've recently have developed and still working on it.
That's cool. I like that. Next question. This is the hardest question. No salsa, mild salsa, or spicy salsa?
Mild, absolutely.
Okay. Good talk. All right. Next question. What's your favorite place on Earth?
The North Cascades.
Where are those located? In Canada?
No, mostly in northern Washington, but maybe it would extend if, technically speaking, would extend into Canada potentially.
So what about the North Cascades do you like?
When I go up there, there's usually no cell service.
Perfect. Yeah.
It's super, it's like remote, just the ruggedness of it. Like I could just sit there and look at the mountains around for like a long time and just be happy without doing anything. I mean, obviously when I'm out there, I'm either hiking or climbing, but even if I'm not, if I'm just sitting by a lake or camping or taking a break, whatever it is, it's just so beautiful. Like it's every time I go out, like if I'm stressed out from work or life or whatever, and I go up there and I just do the hike or the climb or whatever, by the time I'm done, like, I'm usually sore and exhausted, but on Monday when I start work again, like I'm way more like I just feel a lot more centered, way less stressed out, way more productive. Like everything about it just improves. Like my brain function, my body, everything is just set back to like good. So it's kind of like my church or whatever, being out there and experiencing that.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. Does it involve going outside?
Unfortunately, yes, Matthew.
Oh, okay. Well, hard pass then. No, I'm glad that you have that. So, all right, next question. Relative to what first comes to mind when I ask this question, what do you wish you'd done differently?
Okay, first thing that pops to mind is I would have gotten into product design sooner. It's the first thing that comes to mind. I think the details have yet to be thought of. But
okay.
I don't know if you want me to elaborate or just talk out loud about it.
This is like I've said before, like the point of these conversations is I want it to be a conversation between us that just happens to be recorded. So there's no right, wrong answer to any of these things. It's more like if that feels good enough to you, then that's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, career-wise, now if I think about it a little bit more, another thought popped. The thing is, like anything they go back and change, like it would have taken me down a completely different trajectory. Maybe I wouldn't have met the same people. Maybe I never would have been to France after college if I like maybe switched schools, because it's another thing that came to mind is like, I didn't really enjoy my college experience that much. I was just like I studied hard. I did way too many things, and I ultimately was just a very constantly stressed out person, and I didn't realize it. I probably could have improved my experience by either reducing some of those things, switching schools, like doing something different. But yeah, I might not have ended up in Oregon, or I might not have ended up meeting my husband, or I might not have all these things. Like I just don't know what would have changed. And actually, there's a great book out there called The Midnight Library, which I recommend because it totally talks about how you change. Like basically, it does this game of like, what if you change this fact about in the past, like what would your path look like? And it actually goes down a storyline. And I mean, I don't want to, if you haven't read or listened to this, then maybe turn this off. But the end sort of just talks about how like the way things are as they are is probably the best outcome anyway. So, so don't worry, just look at the future. Don't look at the past too much.
Okay.
I don't know.
What would you do for a living if you left what you're doing now?
I'd like to be a helicopter pilot. Yeah, I think it's and not airplanes. I don't care about airplanes. They can't land anywhere, and you need a runway and like I don't know, just airplanes no, but helicopter yes.
All right, absolutely say more about that.
What else to be said? I don't know.
What's the draw? I mean, I understand planes are dumb, obviously, but what is the draw to being a helicopter pilot?
I mean, just how you could see the world from above, and that's in itself cool. But you know, it's a lot of times people get helicopters to get rescued or do some like scientific research, or I mean, there's obviously very dangerous flights too out there where you have to land at very high altitude or navigate between things that are close together. And you have to be really on it and really like focused. And I find that sometimes at work, I'm the opposite of that because there's like 20 things yelling at me at the same time.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely exhausting. And by the end of the day, you just feel like you did nothing. And, you know, the things that make me more relaxed is when I mean, it's completely sounds counterintuitive because you know, as a helicopter pilot, it's definitely not relaxing because you have to stay in the air and there's probably a lot of variables you have to deal with and that. So there might be 20 things coming at you, but ultimately you have one mission is to stay afloat and maybe go from point A to point B. And I'm not a helicopter pilot. So if you are a helicopter pilot listening to this, like I might be completely off the rails and I might decide after a year that I don't want to do this. But like, I don't know, my vision of it is that it's something where you have to be really focused on the task at hand. And it's not like you're being asked to, you know, design this and answer to these 5 Slack messages and also brainstorm some new North Star idea, like all at the same time. Like you can't fly 5 helicopters at the same time. It's not possible. Nobody expects you to do it. But somehow at work, I'm being asked to fly 5 helicopters at the same time, and it's exhausting. So I don't know. It just sounds like a fun change, interesting,
That's
different
cool. I like
career.
that. I like that one. All right. Well, let's get you signed up for lessons.
I did take like a 10 or 1 hour, half an hour, just like a test flight where there was an actual pilot sitting next to me, but she let me maneuver the tiny little helicopter, and it was cool.
That's cool. Yeah, I've been up in the helicopter, I think once, but yeah,
not as a
cool.
pilot.
No, not as a pilot. I don't think I want to be. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be a pilot with passengers. Like even when I ride my motorcycle, like unless you're bleeding to death, you're not getting on my motorcycle with me. I don't want anybody else. I don't want to be responsible for someone else's life that way, you know? I don't even like riding with other people because like I ride slow anyway. And I would do the same thing with the helicopter. I'd be flying slow and I don't know.
Well, I guess you and I are different. I don't know. That responsibility gets me excited of like, I'm responsible for something big and like, I can do this. And it just gives me that like confidence sometimes I feel like I lack in the day-to-day work.
All right. So more helicopter at work is what we're saying. No? Okay. All right.
I'm not
last
sure what
question.
you said. Helicopter or helicopter? I wasn't sure what you said.
Who knows? I've heard it both ways.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, last question. Thankfully, right? All right, so imagine it's a year from now. What do you hope to not be carrying anymore?
Do you want a really literal answer?
Why did I agree to do this? Why is he always asking me these stupid questions? Ildikó, what do you hope to not be carrying anymore? Any answer is welcome.
Okay, I'll give you the joke answer is
okay.
I don't want to carry my then-to-be toddler in a backpack because she's already getting heavy and my back hurts from this weekend. So she better learn how to hike pretty fast because I'm tired of that.
All right, well, we got a year. We can get her set.
Yeah.
She'll be hiking faster than me, so.
She just started walking and she's already running basically. So.
Excellent.
But metaphorically speaking, what I don't want to be carrying, this answer I would have actually had a good answer for this, like, I don't know, when I was younger, because I was always like worried about what other people think about me and like kind of like that little bit of neuroticism, if I said that correctly. So the weight of like that stress. And I think as you get older, you just get less of this. Because after a while, you're just like, I don't care what people think about me. I'm just the way I am. And obviously, if I'm hurting somebody, I'm going to change my behavior. Speaking of the earlier chat we had. But
right.
And maybe there's still some of that sometimes. But that tiptoeing around is just not like, just be who you are. And, obviously assess like how you're behaving around people. And don't be an a-hole. But if you're kind and you're a certain way, like, don't question yourself and keep that burden, like carrying that burden. Just be who you are, and if you can't find a job, just keep trying, because today's market is definitely.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's basically my answer.
Okay. All right. Well,
sorry, I'm
thank you, Ildikó.
Fiddling with something again.
Yeah, I know. All right, let's stop talking then.
Have you seen Ted Lasso?
Yes, I have.
TV series.
Yeah.
So we're watching it right now, and it reminded me of the scene where, I'm really bad at names, but basically the assistant coach went over to the other team. So sorry if you haven't watched this, and it might be a spoiler,
right.
but yeah, like when he goes over and then basically talks crap about Ted, Ted does not attack back. Like similarly, he just makes fun of himself and wins that way. And I thought that was excellent. So good job.
Well, you're welcome. I am amazing, and that veered too close to a compliment for me, and now I'm super uncomfortable. So let's really stop talking. Okay?
All right.